It's always a surprise. It'll be a surprise to everyone when we pop on.
Surprise.
Yeah, that's weird. Oh, I think we're good. Hey guys, Brooke and Laura here for Lawyering Outside the Lines. Thank you for joining us on this last Tuesday of July. I can't believe we're already in July and about to be in August. So for the past few weeks, we've been highlighting diversity and inclusion in the legal profession and what we can all do in our profession to affect change for the better. Our topics so far have been related to women in general, women of color specifically, and our LGBTQ plus colleagues and clients. And so today we're going to talk about something that is kind of a sensitive, touchy subject for some, and that is religion. So religion can truly be a hot button for a lot of people, but today we kind of want to talk about ways that we can improve understanding and recognition of our broader communities. And so that is our topic for this last Diversity and Inclusion Day in July.
And some people might think, why are we talking about religion during Diversity and Inclusion Month? And, you know, we think it's really not widely recognized as a conduit for discrimination, except with specific targeted groups. Many people think of religious discrimination as affecting only those who follow things like Judaism or Islam, but there are other religious and non-religious groups of people that experience uneasiness and worry in personal and professional environments on a regular basis. Our goal today is really simply to shed some light on the subject and offer up information and suggestions on what we can do to be better.
Exactly. So what are some facts? So religious liberty was central to the founders' vision for America. It's actually the first freedom listed in the First Amendment of the Bill of Rights. And a critical component of religious liberty is the right of people of all faiths to participate fully in the benefits and privileges of society without facing any discrimination based on their beliefs. And so, you know, Christianity is a religion that actually experiences discrimination in many parts of the world where they're actually a minority. But here in the United States, self-identifying Christians make up over 70% of reported religious demographics. So out of non-Christian faiths, the largest group of people are actually self-identifying unaffiliated or state that religion is not important to them. So, you know, obviously Christians overwhelmingly are present here. Religious discrimination charges with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission more than doubled from 1992 to 2007, but with a few exceptions in the years following. They stayed almost the same with the last numbers reported in 2019. So this could mean that it's not happening, but more than likely people are either unaware of their recourse options or they don't necessarily pursue claims related to any kind of religious discrimination. So like Laura said, we kind of want to talk about what are some things that we can do. So we can foster an open and accepting environment in our offices with our colleagues. If you're the boss or owner, have written policies in place with your employment documents that allow employees to come to you with specific religious holiday requests for time off. Allow people who don't observe your specific religious holidays to work and possibly take their time off during their own observed holidays. And you as an employer are actually required to provide reasonable accommodations, that's the wording used, unless it would impose an undue hardship as defined by the EEOC. So we want to make sure to respect others' beliefs, even lack of beliefs in some situations. And acknowledging that there are other faiths and spiritual beliefs is a really great first step. So, you know, respect their right to believe something other than what you believe, even if you disagree with them. And it's really important to become informed. Again, that's kind of what we're trying to do today, is just kind of highlight that this is an issue. Become informed. You don't have to learn everything about other religions to become more informed. But if you have a practicing Jewish employee, for instance, partner, colleague, there are some basics that you can read about to better understand them and their faith. So, you know, look for similarities instead of differences. That's helpful. Many faiths have very strong similarities in morality. Also, be intentional and listen when you're talking about religions that aren't necessarily your own. So those are a few ways that we can kind of help foster a better workplace environment as far as religious diversity.
And I'm going to talk about some things that, we should not do when we're dealing with religion in a public space that is not necessarily your own church or prayer environment. And I come at this, I'm going to out myself. I come at this because I am non-religious. I call myself either non-religious or agnostic, depending on my audience. Sometimes I'll even say atheist, depending on my audience, because I've been told agnostic is not a real thing, that you have to pick a side or the other. And I don't like that whole, it has to be this or has to be that, kind of block when it comes to things. So I've been that way my entire life. I did not grow up religious. And so I'm going to share a couple of personal stories about things not to do based on my own experiences, but also, Brooke and I, our combined experiences and talking with other people. And Brooke is going to jump in with maybe some thoughts that she has in the way that she lives her life, as opposed to the different way that I live mine. So number one, don't conduct prayer time at work or during work events. I have experienced that in my life where, you have a moment of silence for prayer or something like that. And it's very uncomfortable for people who either don't do that in their religion or who are not religious to be kind of required to participate, and often looked at if they don't have, people, I don't have my eyes closed. So I'll see people kind of look up and notice that I'm got my head up and my eyes are not closed and my hands are not, whatever it might be. So, just if people of different faiths require or request prayer time during work hours, let's say that you're the owner of your law firm, possibly make accommodations for them to take breaks to do so privately. But if you are an employer or, you own your own law firm or own your own business, definitely don't do something like that as a public requirement with your employees. I'll tell a short story about my little brother who was working for a construction company a few years back, and they had required prayer during the beginning of every single workday. And they also had to sign off on a religious document. Again, keep in mind, construction company. They had to sign off on a religious document that showed the hierarchy of the company, where God was top. They had to acknowledge that God was the leader of the company. And those kinds of things just make people very uncomfortable, because if you want a job, like he needed a job and he was really good at his job and they liked him there. But, it's just a very awkward and uncomfortable situation if you're doing that, in a work environment. So keep that in mind. A big thing that I've experienced my entire life is, don't ask people where do they go to church, because that puts them in that awkward situation of, even if they're Christian, but maybe a different type of Christian than you are, if you don't like Baptists, sometimes within the Christian faith, there are different religions that feel like they're discriminated against, or that they're looked down on or judged by, Catholics or Baptists or Church of Christ or whatever it might be. And, it just puts people in an uncomfortable situation, and it's really not your business. So think about it that way too. If someone is talking about church maybe, and you want to ask a question, that's fine, but it's not an out of the blue question to ask. And I remember when I lived and worked in Houston, Texas, I knew a professor at one of the law schools down there who, when they had a recruiting event for a specific teacher that they were trying to hire, that was one of the questions that he was asked at the table. And I just remember that conversation with that professor that I knew, and how inappropriate, obviously, but also everyone, he was Jewish and the rest of the table wasn't, and it's very awkward and uncomfortable. Don't ask what their specific plans for, or what their plans are for specific religious holidays, like Easter or Passover or something of that nature. Because again, the goal here is to try to figure out an open and, foster an open kind of environment where people don't feel like they are going to be judged or looked down on, or not get a job or not get a car. I was telling Brooke before we started our live that I bought my very first car for myself when I was 19 years old, and I had test driven it and went back to pay the woman and actually get the car. And she said, I forgot to ask you if you'd accepted Jesus Christ as your personal Lord and Savior. And I didn't know what to say. I'm 19 years old and I wanted the car. And I knew enough, because I was 19. I knew enough to where I couldn't say no. or I didn't feel like I could say no because I wanted the car. And so I kind of hemmed and hawed and said I hadn't found a church and that kind of thing. But those kinds of questions about not just church, but, you know, hey, what are your plans for Easter? Well, I don't celebrate Easter, so I'm going to hang out this weekend like I do every weekend, you know, that kind of thing. Again, it depends on what your environment is. If you're in church or you're talking to people that you know go to church or something like that, definitely ask those questions. But if you're not sure, you don't know if that person is religious, maybe don't ask about specific holiday plans for specific religions. Another thing, and this kind of goes along with just in general, our discrimination and inclusivity ideas that for the entire month, is don't speak in stereotypes or discriminating phrases about using specific religions as an example. So when I worked in Texas, I was with Westlaw, and I had a law firm that was primarily made up of Jewish lawyers and staff. And one of my sales reps, when I was buying lunch one day for a lunch and learn or something like that, one of my sales reps made a very, very gross to me comment about their, you know, the propensity for Jewish people to be cheap and, you know, this kind of thing. And it's just, you know, it's just gross. And when you do things like that, again, you're perpetuating stereotypes and using those things as negative connotations for different religions. And so think about that when you're, you know, some of the things that Brooke and I both, I think, have been aware of with a lot of things that are happening in the world right now is that I didn't know where certain phrases came from. I didn't, you know, maybe we didn't know that it came from, you know, something specific about slavery. I'm making it an intentional point to not use those phrases anymore because of that connotation. I wasn't aware of it, but now that I am, I'm trying really hard to back off on it so that I'm not making anyone else uncomfortable or perpetuating that as a part of our culture here in the US. And same thing with religion. There are phrases out there that I will not repeat on here because I don't like them, but I think we all know some phrases that let's just keep it out of our vocabulary because implying those types of things are almost always negative connotations with those stereotypical phrases and things of that nature. Brooke, I don't know if you have anything you want to add there.
I was just going to add, really, I mean, coming from a different perspective and also the same perspective as you. I mean, I've always grown up in church. I'm a Christian. But what I have found to be impactful is being aware of a lot of these things and intentional. Like Laura said, that's really important because, you know, and this is many faiths. This is not just Christianity. I mean, we're taught in our different religions to, you know, spread our religion, let other people know. And we're not necessarily saying don't do that. We're saying to be aware of how you're doing that. And I didn't even know anybody that was openly agnostic or atheist until I was in law school. And, you know, what I have found to be the most effective is, you know, I just go and I live my life and I, you know, am true to myself. So this is who I am. And so I am showing that to other people through my behavior. I'm not necessarily preaching at other people. And I have found people to be a lot more open to listening and more, it's easier to have those conversations if you are coming at it from a place of authenticity as opposed to trying to, you know, force your beliefs on someone else. But just, you know, you don't want to make people feel uncomfortable. And I think sometimes as Christians, we tend to approach the conversations in a way that is more harmful than helpful. So, you know, like Laura said, there are a lot of things that we shouldn't do. She's not saying there are not situations. It's very much situational, depending on your audience, depending on your environment. But just, you know, really go be authentically you, whatever that looks like, whether you're religious or non-religious, you know, and approach it that way, approach your conversations that way, and be mindful and thoughtful. Everything we've talked about this entire month, as far as diversity and inclusion, really the central focus, the central theme is, you know, awareness. And we're not saying people are intentionally going out and doing these things. And like Laura said, there were things we didn't even recognize were necessarily harmful. So just educate yourself, be aware, and be very considerate of one another because, you know, the end goal is really for us all to come together.
Yeah. And one more thing before I wrap up, being non-religious my entire life and growing up primarily in the South, it has been interesting, but not shocking to, or maybe shocking to me at the time, but not necessarily now that I'm an adult. I experienced the same issues pretty much everywhere I lived. And the only place that I didn't really experience it was in Chicago, but that's also, you know, big city environment, same thing in DC. But when I lived in Houston, Texas, it was actually worse for me in the work environment in Houston, Texas than it was in Arkansas. People were a lot more vocal about asking me questions about my religion and my faith and my church and that kind of thing in a work environment. And because I was a vendor there, I was a Westlaw account manager and sales rep, it was even more awkward because I needed that sale, or I didn't want to, you know, take off a client or something. Did you have a child that came in?
My cats are fighting. Sorry, that was so loud. It scared me. I didn't know they were out here. They were directly behind me fighting. Okay.
I think I heard your son let them out of his room. So.
We'll have a conversation after this. I said, leave it in there.
This is the way of, you know, working from home.
That was hilarious.
We always do. We always work from home. I'm actually looking to get a puppy. If anybody knows of dogs out there in Central Arkansas, but I fully expect that in the next few months that there will be yipping or something like that in the background for me, so I can help compete with Brooke on the meowing and fighting. So. But we always appreciate you guys listening to us. And, you know, this month was very important for both of us because we do, you know, we do have a lot of desire to have diversity and inclusion be a bigger part of everyone's lives, just because, you know, the world that we live in, you know, it's small. And, you know, if you can make changes in your own specific world and make it a better place, your bubble, I guess, no matter how big it is. It's, you know, religion can be really extremely important part of people's lives, but we all need to recognize that it may not be for others, or religion may look different and be an extremely part of someone else's life. So we just want, you know, the point for today is just to be, that we'd like you to take away from today is just to be mindful that not everyone's beliefs might be the same as yours. And we encourage you to be open and allow people to feel like they can approach you without judgment, or comment or reply without judgment. Make your world a better place. And we hope that you have a great rest of your week, which is also the rest of July. And we'll see you here bright and early in August, next Tuesday for another episode of Legal, I was going to say the different one. Lawyering Outside the Lines.
We'll be here for that too.
Yeah. At 1 p.m. Eastern, 12 Central, 11 Mountain, and 10 Pacific. And thanks so much and have a great rest of your week.